is what I think is some of the three initiatives that are kind of coming your way. I'm going to talk about them in pretty short, and then we can have more dialogue on them. I didn't have the 3G sunset on this list, but I can certainly talk to that if you want to have conversations about that when we get done. Rapid has a pretty good sized footprint across the US and Canada, and has a pretty good insight on what's going on with it. But that being said, let's get started and we'll go from there. So see if I can get this slide to advance. Okay. First thing that I wanted to just touch real quick is there's a couple standards that are out there that are in progress or are changing. I'm going to start with the easy one first, which is NFPA 720. I think you probably all know this is getting migrated to 72 at some point in time, but right now it stands on its own. CSAA, which was the Central Station Alarm Association before it was TMA and did the name change, did a standard on CO response. It's been over 10 years now. And that standard of response was to call the prem, tell everybody to get out of the house, and then turn around and dispatch no matter what the answer was. We let that standard just time out and expire out, which it has at this point in time. And so now the governing standard for that is 720, which reverses those roles. So you might want to take a look at what your monitoring centers are doing or what you want to do and make an adjustment if you feel it's necessary to dispatch first and then turn around and do a notification and tell them to get out of the house. But that's out there. The bigger standard that's out there today, and the first iteration of this is going to be primarily focused at intrusion, although some other things can fall into this, is this whole concept of scoring. Today, when we call in a burglar alarm to a PSAP or other agency that's going to be responding, for the most part, sans some of the video and audio verification that's going on, you're going to tell them that there's a motion or there's a door, or there's a combination of things, but they really don't have a lot of other insight beyond that. And one of the things public service has been asking for a long time is, look, we need more insight. We need more information. We need to have a better handle on what you're dealing with so that we can prioritize our response, go faster when it's necessary, go slower if we can, and be able to really leverage, especially today with staffing being the way it is at public service, giving them some hint of what's going on. The offset of that is it gives you some opportunities to upsell some stuff. But here's the gist of what's happening today. So if you look at really 5 different levels are going to be rolled out. Level 0 is that there is no alarm worthy of sending a response to. So for example, a burglar alarm with a cancel or an opening or some other event that occurs, card read, anything that would validate that somebody belongs there, that would drop to a level 0. Traditional alarms, anything that you get today, anything that we normally get today would be considered a level 1 alarm. That doesn't change. Then to get to level 2, there has to be some substantiation that there's a human on site. And it has to be more than a couple of zones. There has to be some other method. So it could be audio or video being used. It could also be other technologies that are sensing presence of a human being. We're starting to see technologies in the LiDAR and radar space, Wi-Fi space. There's also presence detection to understand, things like whose phone just got there and whose phone just left. But the overarching idea for level 2 will be that there's a human being on site and you've not been able to authenticate them. Level 3 goes the next step further, which says that there's a very high probability of a crime in progress, meaning you're seeing somebody forcibly break their way into a building, or they're stealing stuff as they're running out the door. Those kinds of very obvious things will rise to a level 3. And then anytime an event, and this happens on occasion, where it starts out as a burglary and ends up with something much more dangerous, but the concept is threat to life happens, that raises that to a level 4. So if you look in your video and you see somebody with a gun at their head, that becomes a level 4. And so the idea is to be able to now give this information to law enforcement, and then they can now prioritize their response on the other side. Law enforcement has been working within the standards group for the last year to work on this. They're heavily involved, and the participation has been unbelievable. There's about 60 people in the standards group that have been working through this. The plan right now is that it's going to go to a semi-private review by the end of March, and then that will get a first pass from people that are sort of trusted to give good feedback, do some sanity checks, and then then it will go for public comment the following month, assuming that there's no major rewrite, and then it'll go to public comment with the idea in mind is having the standard ready to go sometime in Q4. So that's coming. If you want more details on that, we can certainly talk about that. But that's on the standard side of the world. That's what's going on there. Next thing I wanted to talk about is, and most of this revolves around intrusion today, although it certainly does apply to fire because the numbers are almost identical in terms of fire dispatches being false. We look at the alarms today, and we're still, even though the number of calls for service compared to the number of accounts has drastically dropped. At Rapid, for example, we clear very close to 90% of all burglar alarms that come in do not ever get dispatched. And so that number has dramatically increased over time. But what hasn't changed over time is what we do finally give to law enforcement is still run a 95 to 98 or 99% false alarm, depending on the technology behind it. And so with that coupled with the dramatic increase in new systems that are being installed out there, law enforcement looks at that and says, you guys are still giving us the same old stuff. Everything you give us is false. Can we do something about that? And so some of the things that really start to roll into that are, what do customers want? What do they expect? What is their method of communication that makes sense? We know, for example, phone calls just flat don't work. We average 73 to 75% of all phone calls, outbound phone calls to subscribers, go to voicemail. And that's used to be our primary way of communicating with a subscriber, to say their alarm's going off in your home or your business. What do you want us to do about it? And so as we look to that, that method simply is not tenable long term. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Part of it is we don't have home phones anymore. We only have cell phones. If you're like me, I get 15 calls a day to get my warranty extended. And if it's not that, it's some other vile medical disease that I must have because I need these drugs and they're calling me to sell them. So we're all getting inundated with with sort of noise on phones, and all of that just leads to people they just don't answer their phone anymore. And especially true if it's a number they don't recognize. And but even if they do recognize it, most of the time it goes to voicemail, and the numbers prove that out. I was talking to some of my colleagues at ADT the other day, and they're not at 75%, but they're right at 70% of their calls go to voicemail. So even when you start to really scale that up across significant residential account base, the number is still really, really high. So what do we do about that? Using other alternative methods are certainly out there. Text messaging is incredibly successful in being able to communicate with subscribers, where those numbers actually reverse, where you have an 85 or 90% engagement by using text messages, and sometimes in a combination with push messages to apps. That can really change your outcome. For example, we rolled out a product. It's been over a year now. It's actually been a product of ours for the last 7 or 8 years, but we really fine-tuned it during COVID because we had to. And it's an SMS product, and when we deploy that across our customer base, we statistically reduce 45% of all dispatches across that customer base. Imagine if I could go to a law enforcement agency and say overnight I could turn off 45% of your requests for service, what that would do to their faces. So there are technologies out there to mitigate a lot of these things. You gotta think outside the box. You gotta talk to your customers and understand. You have to train them on rollouts, things like that. But you can't reduce this number, and that just makes not only what we do more valuable to consumers, but it also makes us look good in front of law enforcement, who then in turn, takes the alarms that we do send much more seriously. We're also seeing the desire to have better situational awareness. And somebody described this to me, and it really really took me by surprise at the time. And I forget, I've been doing this since right out of college. And so, dealing with alarms and people calling and things like that, you get pretty good at it. And this guy told me, he says, I had a call one day. He says, I was on my way to work, and ADT was his alarm company, although it really doesn't matter. He gets a call, and the person on the other says the phone says, "Hi, this is ADT. We have an alarm going off at your house. What would you like us to do about it?" And his answer is, "Well, what do you mean?" And through, in the back of his mind, he's running, "Are my kids at home? Is my wife at home? Are they okay? What do you mean I got an alarm? Is somebody at the house?" And he got to the point where he's just flying blind. He says, all these things rush through your head and you don't know, should I have them dispatch it and, face the false alarm? Should I not? And my wife is okay. I don't really know. And so he decided that based on that experience, he was going to come up with an idea that created, I just use situational awareness. And there's a bunch of different ways of doing this, but the concept is simple, is trying to understand who's in your house, who just left your house, or who just got to your house. And if you look at that from that perspective, you can start to make better decisions on how you dispatch and who you call first. So for example, if you just left your house and the alarm just triggered, and we know you just left your house 2 minutes ago, and it's you, not your wife or your kids, we should just call you because you're the one that just left. And the same as the inverse is true too. If you're the one that just got there and set the alarm off, we should just call you and not call the prem and everybody else on the call list. We should just talk to you or send you a text message or whatever it happens to be. And so trying to be smart about your workflow really does matter. And you're going to start to see tools and platforms and things like that are coming. They're going to help you do some of that work, but pay attention to that. Next thing I want to talk about, I'm going to save a lot of the really detail in case you guys have questions, so we can get through this and leave plenty of time for Q&A. The next one is, there's a talent crisis going on today. And, you've heard the term the Great Resignation and, the level of inflation that we're dealing with today. And if you look at what it's like, and I know every one of you are feeling this if you're trying to hire just plain old ordinary office staff, let alone talented staff like IT and technicians and things like that, it's a real challenge out there. The labor market has gone upside down in terms of what you have to do to be able to hire. The amount of money that you have to pay to get even mediocre people through the door has dramatically increased. And this is going to inflate all the way across the boards. And so you need to be prepared for this. And also it means you're going to have to change the way you hire, the way you recruit, the benefits and all the things that are around that. And unfortunately, that just exacerbates the inflation part of it. But certainly what we're seeing is a gigantic change in how we hire and how we recruit and the level of effort it takes to recruit and hire somebody today. So for you guys to be successful, it means you're going to have to really look towards other solutions that have worked in the past that may not work today. And I urge you to get ahead of that curve and start working with, other solutions, whether that's organizations like ZipRecruiter or Facebook or other people to help hiring, but also spending a lot more time at your community colleges and other things that would allow you to hire people out of those programs. But it's definitely changing, and I don't think it's going to change back anytime soon. But that is certainly something that you have to get ready for because it's coming and it's coming fast. We've had to increase our starting wage for operators by about 35% just to be competitive in the 3 markets that we're in today for hiring staff. And you can imagine what that feels like if you had to increase your salary ranges all the way across the board to do that, which is what we've had to do in order to continue to be able to hire new talent. So those are my 4 things that I want. That and the 3G sunset are the 4 things that I wanted to have on the table, and I can open up for questions now.
Oh, I have a question, Morgan.
Sure.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Gotta love Verizon.
I was muted. I had the first question. The AVS 01 standard, which organization was behind that? Was that like the CSAA or SIA or something like that?
TMA was the originator of that. That
That's
gets
the Monitoring
paired.
Association,
Yeah.
right? TMA.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, and from that you have representation from dozens of alarm companies and monitoring companies, but also public service, as well as 911 providers. People that provide back-end services to 911, like Intrado and people like that, are also in that that work group.
All right, my second question and follow-up question, not that it has anything to do with that, but I'm not that familiar with with really any central station management or alarm software. Does it in fact have the ability to automatically send SMS text to a subscriber to alert them of an activation, alarm activation? Is that standard functionality for most central station software, operating software?
Well, I don't know that I want to say it's standard for everybody in the marketplace, because I think there's some that don't. We've been doing two-way texting since 2010-ish. And then most recently, we still support two-way text, where you can text back and forth, just like an operator can text, just like you would have in a conversation with your best friend. You can text back and forth through our platform. But we also have what we call rapid SMS, which is an application. And the way it works is we send out a text message, and in that text message that goes out is a link to a web-based application. So anybody that has a web-enabled device can use that. And within that, it allows you to do a bunch of things. It allows you to text back and forth with everybody that's on your call list, but it also allows you to cancel the alarm. It can also allow you to confirm the alarm. If there's video and things like that, it can associate that for you if you would like. There's the ability to look at history and see what else has gone off through that little application. And the thing that's cool about that is, and that methodology, we're not the only ones that have a similar approach to that, is that you don't have to have an app pre-installed to make that work, right? If you have an alarm.com app, great app, Total Connect, it's an app, but not everybody on your call list has that app. So if you don't have it, you don't see it, you don't get to use it if you're not a logged in user. This will work for anybody on your call list, but text messaging has become a pretty normalized thing to be able to do. Not everybody does two-way, and not everybody does applications behind it, but in terms of a common methodology, it's been out there for a long time.
Or you're talking about general, most software, administrative software packages are going to support that.
Yeah, any mainstream monitoring automation package knows what to do with text messages.
Good.
Absolutely. And you can have text messages, they can come from short codes, they can come from long codes, and they can come from vanity codes. So you can, depending on what you're trying to get to. So for example, let's say you have a voice toll-free number that you have at your monitoring center. Doesn't matter if you're a dealer or of a wholesale company, or you run your own center. You can set up text messages to come from the same number that your voice call is coming from. So if they save that in their contact list, for example, then it'll come and it'll have a name associated with it if it's on their contact list. You can do things like that as well, depending on what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, thanks.
Sure.
Morgan, let me ask you a question about the 95% false alarm percentage, because it seems like we're kind of stuck there, no matter how far back in our history we tend to go. And I'm just wondering if that's a number that ultimately, I guess arguably, would never actually change, because if you're looking at it from a law enforcement perspective, if you give them 100 dispatches or 1,000 dispatches, granted there's a volume difference, but if they're looking at it as we caught someone or we didn't catch someone, which tends to be kind of where, to them it's a false if they don't apprehend someone. So how do we actually end up moving that marker?
Yeah, sure. I think I'd push back a little bit on whether they caught somebody. When we talk to law enforcement, and this is a very common conversation, is their definition of a false alarm is an alarm that has occurred where there wasn't a break-in, right? There wasn't somebody that forcibly came in or wasn't authorized to go in. They don't care if they catch some. I mean, they love to catch people, don't get me wrong, but their definition doesn't revolve around catching somebody. It's whether or not a crime has occurred. And the crime may be different. So for example, somebody coming on property or into a building may be a trespass versus a burglary, but nevertheless, a crime was committed. Different jurisdictions do different things. And we may not ever change that particular number. And that's kind of the point of the whole scoring thing, is to be able to allow them to manage what is likelier to be a crime in progress versus not within their organization. What we're seeing with law enforcement in general is that it's been a binary decision. Either they're completely 100% verified response or they're not. And what we're offering them now and what they've been asking for is, look, give us some grades in between so that we don't have to turn off response to everybody. We'll run faster on the events that are likely or a higher crime potential, and the lower ones will still what we normally do, but maybe only send one car versus two. And they want to reduce the crime. That's a big part of their world, right? Is reducing that. But at the same time, they have some limited resources, and this will give everybody some tools to try and categorize that for them before they do it for you. Because if you don't, they will. They'll just broadcast and file everything, and nobody will go to anything. And that's becoming a really alarming trend across the country, is the concept of broadcast and file. So this will give you some tools to be able to accelerate those alarms when appropriate.
It almost sounds like the at least from a law enforcement perspective, this scoring concept almost feels a little bit like they took the page out of what the fire service has been doing, with the number of alarms equals a certain number of trucks.
Sure.
Very
similar.
The size of the fire, the size of the, there's a lot more dynamic that goes into the equation.
Right. Right.
On or off.
Yeah, and you see that a lot, right? You get a single smoke detector. They, in some cities, they don't even send an engine out anymore. They send an inspector out, and he'll go see what's going on. Versus, 5 smokes, 3 duct detectors, and 2 zones of water flow. Guess what? 5 engines are company, and so they're trying to manage their resources smart. And so now we're going to try and give them some tools to do that in a standard. If we don't do it as a standard, it'll be willy-nilly all across the country, and everybody will just do what they want. You'll have competitors out there saying that they have, the best, and they don't. You'll have people that lie through their teeth, and we don't want that. What we want is a standardized way to do this, to score this, that everybody can do, and be able to get that, be able to be consistent across the marketplace.
So where I guess that leads a little bit to the next question is, we as an industry, and obviously the fire service and law enforcement have done this as well. They've written standards over the years, which if you look at them, obviously could improve a lot of things. But if there's no localized enforcement, then it's like, well, I wrote a great law, but it didn't do any good because nobody was out there holding, no pun intended, holding their feet to the fire.
Sure.
And so where does this evolve to? Because we're still getting the same problems where, dealers are out there installing residential grade equipment in commercial environments. Not that that's the whole be all end all of the problem, but
right.
Nobody's walking in. There's no fire inspector or electrical inspector that walks in and goes, no, you can't do this.
Right, sure. Well, I think what you're gonna see is hopefully that the market will tend to push this along. So, and really kind of ask 2 questions, right? How is the adoption going to happen on the law enforcement side, and what that looks like? We've got pretty good buy-in from like international chiefs of police and international sheriffs organizations and local operators to really want to use this standard as a requirement in their jurisdiction. Now, obviously, we can't. There's, roughly 70,000 different jurisdictions and 6,000 different PSAPs across the world. I obviously can't, force them to adopt something, but I think you'll see pretty good adoption. Everybody that we've talked to in law enforcement and that on the PSAP level thinks that this is going to be, very helpful in their world. So we're hoping for fast adoption. If fast adoption happens, then this will be a way for the professional guys to be able to really separate themselves from the guy that's putting an all-in-one on the front of the front of a warehouse and doing wireless on all the overhead doors. We're hoping that you'll be able to go in and say, well, with my system, I can get you to a priority level 3, and this is how we're going to do that, and this is how you get good response. That makes sense?
No, it does. It does. Well, it's like anything. I mean, you can put up all the speed limit signs on the highway you want, but if nobody's ever going to
Sure.
pull you over for driving 90, you can ignore the signs. So
Yeah. And you'll get. I think you'll have law enforcement that'll come out and say, this is what our process is. If it's a level 1, it's what it's always been, is broadcast and file. If somebody's got nothing else to do, they'll go look at it. But if you want to get to level 2 or 3, then we'll go on it. And you'll start to see consumers figure that out. And I think the industry will be smart enough in the local markets to be able to market that. Certainly the bigger companies are going to market the heck out of that, trying to gain market share. So hopefully the competition will be able to push that initiative along.
So ultimately, does this become a freestanding adoption where a municipality or a state or whatever does it, kind of like what you've seen with CO1, or is it a roll into alarm ordinances?
I think it could be both. Some states have requirements today. Things like enhanced call verification is done at some state levels, and then you have local ordinances that are done at local ordinances too. Both, I think it'll probably be both. It'll be incorporated into what SEAC pushes, which is their model ordinance. It'll be integrated into part of that, so that people that have model ordinances can, pull those across pretty easily. We'll see how it rolls out with public safety. It's hard to second guess how they're going to do this.
Morgan, I had a question for you. What's the role of the different vendors, manufacturers, and third-party platforms when it comes to this standard, and kind of what's been their reaction to this?
Reaction's been very positive. So if you look at organizations like alarm.com, they're part of this group, right? So they have a ton of information to determine a lot of different things that you don't see. You don't know patterns, you don't know all kinds of different pieces of data that revolve around the use of a security systems. And so they are taking all this data, consuming that internally, and then assisting the automation platform in coming up with a final score. So you'll see a combined effort of information that flows into the automation system, to also information flowing in from platforms like alarm.com or Honeywell's Total Connect or Abode or some of the other platforms that are out there today. You'll see data coming in from that as well. So it's been a really good partnership, and this will be level 1. This will be the first iteration of it comes out, and it'll be like any other standard. It'll get reviewed and tweaked along the way, and it's set up so it's simple enough if you're a very small organization and don't have a lot of the automatic tools and things like that at your disposal. You can score this in your head. We've created some tools, some cards, and some ways to do it, so you can do this pretty easily. If you're automated, then the automation systems will do that for you. They've all been part of this process and project as well. So the automation systems will be able to ingest all this information, and then as you call that agency or send that event via ASAP to PSAP, or however you're going to get that alarm to public service, it'll do that final score for you.
So, Morgan, I have a question. So you kind of mentioned ASAP to PSAP.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see, I know down here in Cincinnati at one point they had written part of the city contract to say, we're only going to accept alarms in our at Radcliffe down here at our alarm center, where from ASAP to PSAP. Do you think that these, you know, the Tritechs and the Motorola's and whoever the head the CAD, do you think with the ASAP to PSAP coming into them, do you think that'll be built into their side, or do you even see where the data that the alarm center is getting pushing out to the dispatch centers? Are they also then looking at that additional information as it comes in and kind of doing this level thing also, or no?
Yep. So let me give you just a quick, you know, sort of state of the union with ASAP to PSAP today. So ASAP to PSAP has been around for a long time, and it's a direct CAD integration, and it is integrated with almost all the major CAD CAD suppliers are integrated with ASAP. That's been done for, you know, many years. Motorola and companies like that have had that integration for a long time. What's not happened is that those CAD updates have not gotten to PSAPs, either because of budgetary reasons or resource reasons or both. So while, you know, the product exists and can certainly be consumed by, you know, probably 75 or 80% of the PSAPs that are online today, they just haven't had the budgets to be able to do that. We're starting to see those numbers ramp. You know, if I look at the first year, I think we had 2 or 3 PSAPs the whole year. You know, now we're doing 2 a month. And as money rolls out on the federal side to be prepared for NG 911, you're seeing more money go to that. We're also working on some other interfaces to go be able to deliver messaging to the call taker side through their CPE equipment. It's not ideal, but it's better than making a phone call, and certainly more accurate than making a phone call. ASAP to PSAP in and of itself has the priorities built into the most current version of the protocol today, so they'll be able to get that information, you know, right to their CAD to be able to prioritize that. So that was already thought through, you know, a number of years ago in preparation for this. That answer the question completely?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Morgan, a question about SEAC rolling this out in California today. Do you have even a minor guess of what the soonest this would start really affecting us? The next 3 months, the next 3 years, any idea?
You're talking about CSP01, the scoring standard, or ASAP to PSAP?
Oh, ASAP, and I was talking about ASAP. They're rolling it out with California today.
No, it's not rolling anywhere into California today. I can tell you that with certainty.
They're meeting with the chiefs of police in California.
That's correct.
And they're presenting it, is what I meant.
That's correct. So here's the hang up with California. It is not a technology problem, it's a political problem. California DOJ decided that they thought that using the criminal justice network to send alarm traffic was against was a foul with a business rule. They didn't want to have private industry, you know, benefit because of using a, you know, theoretically a statewide resource. The reality of it is it's the reverse. You know, the real benefactors for this are being able to take what averages for most people 20% of their inbound call traffic and moving that to an automated model. And that's what the meeting today really is. I don't know what that meeting is going to net. I really don't. You know, Cal DOJ can be pretty stubborn about getting stuff done. There's certainly at least a half a dozen PSAPs that are, you know, chomping at the bit to get this turned up and get this going. We're ready to go as soon as we can, but they're going to have to allow that traffic to come down through inlets and through the state switches. If not, you know, there's some other solutions that we might look at that would bypass the criminal justice network, but would, you know, also have to be sanctioned too. And I think coming out of that meeting today, we'll have a much better handle on where we're at. So, but in terms of how that's going to go, I have no idea. I'm thinking positively, but you never know. It's a different world today when it comes to trying to staff PSAPs. So we're hoping that that taking 20% of their traffic and automating that will be enough of a incentive to change their thinking.
Thank you.
Morgan,
Sure.
do you know of any municipalities that only allow alarms to come in ASAP to PSAP yet?
No,
Okay.
I don't. And I, there's been a couple that have talked about some other things like, we're only going to allow an alarm to come through ASAP if it has a valid permit and some things like that. Most of those original decisions were rolled back. So right now, to the best of my knowledge, there's nobody that says this is the only way they can happen. If you talk to every single one of them, they would prefer that, but that becomes a political hot button. That makes sense anyways.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like these places would want ASAP to PSAP because of staffing issues is really,
Sure.
I know here in Cincinnati, it's become a pretty big issue at the county-wide side.
Yeah, it's a big issue everywhere. And we have yet to find a PSAP that said, no, we don't want this. It's never a PSAP that, says they don't want it. It's always either they don't have the CAD application that's ready to take it and they don't have the funds to do it, or for some reason the state has made a decision, a political one, to say, no, we don't want that traffic on our CGIS network. But I think some of those will start to change over time. And as we work through other workarounds, there's nothing magic about the state CGIS network other than the security side of it. We're not dealing with stuff that's horribly secure anyhow. We're not dealing with Watson warrants and stuff like that when it comes to what we send. So, if we can create a workaround, which is technically very simple to do, if we can get the blessings of the state to allow that, then we can move quickly on those that are currently hung up because of a political decision. But it is pretty amazing to be able to do that, to be able to send that alarm event electronically. But almost as important is to be able to cancel it. You can cancel in a couple of seconds. It's one thing calling a PSAP being put on hold for 15 minutes and give them a dispatch, and then try and cancel that, and you call them back and you're on the same hold. So being able to cancel these quickly is every bit as important as being able to get to them quickly.
Boy, I didn't even think of that part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can actually be talking to the subscriber, get the password or whatever it is you're doing to authenticate them, and a couple of keystrokes, and you're not even done with a phone call with the consumer, and you've already sent the cancel in. And you'll get a pretty quick feedback as to whether or not they've been there or not. You also get all the CAD information back as to where they're at in the process. So you get units assigned, units en route, units on scene, final disposition. So you kind of you can close that circle all the way. That all happens with ASAP as well. So you have a lot more understanding about what's going on.
So I wanted to throw out, just to give you an opportunity to kind of touch on, is there anything new and exciting with your presidency at TMA that you want to kind of touch on real quick, or?
Well, I don't know about new and exciting. TMA is hyper-focused in a couple of areas right now. Standards is one. They're knee-deep in a dozen different standards out there. And, making sure that we have this, I call level the playing field initiative. We don't want people that are, can be bad actors out there. And the only way you do that is you create standards that are enforceable. And then those get enforced either by UL or other governing bodies. So a lot of work going on standards. Paralleling that is education, because it doesn't do any good to write a bunch of standards and create a bunch of new ways of doing things if we don't have our constituents educated on what that looks like. So big push on education. You're going to see a whole bunch of online material be able to be rolled out for people that are TMA members to be able to have access to. So that'll be pretty exciting for them. And then the other part is, we're going to be surrounded by technology, whether we like it or not, over the next 5 years. It's dramatically going to change. And so not only does TMA and the standards and training have to adjust for that, but we got to get everybody else up to speed to what that looks like, because big tech's in the business today. They're going to continue to drive technology innovation, which is good, because it it creates awareness, but we also need the independent dealers to be able to, jump on and say, I can do that. And so you don't have a hole. So a lot of work going on making sure the monitoring centers overall know what's coming and how to prepare for that.
And that's what you'll do in your spare time.
That's what I do in my spare time. Yeah, I'm fortunate enough to work for an organization that really believes that, innovation is a big part of what we do. And so most of what I'm doing is stuff that's, 2 or 3, 4 years out, to make sure that we're ready for, that influx of competition that's coming in. That can be kind of bloody and ugly sometimes, but most of the time it's a lot of fun.
Well, you've had a couple years to warm up to it, so.
Right, going on 42. So yeah, it's good stuff, but I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. So it's gonna be a while longer. We'll be at ISC if anybody else wants to, swing by the booth and say hi. I'll be there. So if you wanna say hi, Neil will be there with his smiling face and bells on, I'm sure. So
Morgan, I have a question. This is Alan.
yeah.
How many are you seeing more and more systems coming in where they combine both the standard alarm system with cameras, where a zone comes in and to the central station, and then the camera comes up so that you can see what's going on there at the time of the alarm, or
Sure.
not?
Absolutely. And you see it in a couple different flavors. So a really good example of that is, the alarm triggers, and I look and I see a person in your house. I don't know who that person is. I know it's a person. So
Yeah.
I can get that to a level 2, right? I can make that assumption pretty easy. What I
Mhm.
don't know is that person's intent. But you do, because you know your house, right, or your business. And so what you're seeing now is kind of this hybrid concept of, look, let's get the alarm and the video to central station. That's helpful, but let's also get it to the consumer to look at that in parallel, so they can look at that and very quickly go, friend or foe, right? And so you're starting to see that sort of morphing of two different paths at the same time, and allowing both the central station operator and the consumer kind of manage that together in order to have a good outcome. But to your answer, yeah, video verification uh, is becoming a significantly large part of our normal day-to-day stuff.
Mhm.
And audio, by the way, is increasing dramatically too. Audio is a incredibly efficient way to know if somebody's in a home or a business and doesn't have near the privacy concerns. So you're starting to see a pretty significant uptick in audio, both on the sort of Sonatrol type audio, but also on traditional two-way audio listening.
Yeah. I mean, the video obviously is problematic in a home, just for privacy issues, but
Yeah.
I see it commercially
Mhm.
more so, or possibly video outside in a residential.
Sure. Yeah, and a
Uh,
lot of times what you'll see also will be platforms that take like the inside video cameras and either turn them into thermal so you can't see, specifics, or they'll turn them into avatars. And so, yeah, you don't know if they're, got red hair, black hair, or no hair, but you do know it's a biped that's walking around, and then let the consumer make that decision whether or not the central station operator should be able to see that video. You're seeing a huge trend in that world where, especially on inside cameras, consumer will say, yep, that person's not supposed to be in my house. And then that video becomes available to a dispatcher to be able to manage and relay that information to law enforcement.
right. Are more and more departments going to verified type of alarms? I mean, is that a trend, or did that
Yes.
kind of hit a wall?
No, it is. You're starting to see more and more that what they're doing is, and it's a political decision that they make, because in order for them to change, and this is true for most organizations, most agencies, is that you have ordinances and you have policies. Ordinances are all about, across the board kind of changes. Policies can be internal. So what you're seeing is law enforcement by policy saying, well, we're gonna, if there's no verification component to it, and that verification component, varies from place to place. But if there isn't a verification component to it, it's a broadcast and file response. We'll go see it if we can. If we're busy, we don't. And then if it does have a verification process or component to it, then they'll roll on it. So you're starting to see what functionally ends up as a verified response city, even though they did it by policy to avoid, all the court battles and fights with city council and everything else. And so you're seeing more and more of that, for sure, no doubt about that.
So that would be similar then to what the city of Akron did about 9 years ago. They changed it as a policy
Mhm.
within the department versus within legislation with any of
Right.
the council members.
Yeah, you see that methodology a lot to be able to, for police departments to be able to do something without getting into a war. One of the reasons why doing this standard for different grades is really important, because they can now not, they don't have to change their, legislation. They can change their policy and adjust accordingly,
Right.
because they're strapped. I mean, talk to any cop on the street. They're busy running calls for service all day long, and they're mostly liking, running 10 to 12-hour days all day too.
Yeah, that's a real problem.
It really
Okay.
is. It really is.
It really is a problem. It's not getting better. It's getting worse.
You're also starting to see more and more private dispatch response too.
Mhm.
We've integrated electronically with organizations like Responder and Securitas and others, where, the sort of Uber for guard concept is being used, and where response times are critical, especially on high value targets. So you're starting to see a lot more private response sort of bubble up now today, and we can send them just like we do an ASAP to PSAP type of event, where they get it in a couple of seconds, and then off to the races they go. So you're starting to see more and more of that too. And at scale, it becomes pretty affordable compared to trying to do a little bunch of one-offs. But if you can get somebody in a metro area that can run this stuff all day long, and then get that cost into, either a few dollars a month or a $20 or $30 response cost, it's not too prohibitive. So keep an eye on that too.
Right.
Do we have any other questions? Alan, do you have anything you want to wrap up with?
No, just to thank Morgan. This is very informative. And I appreciate your taking the time out of the day to do this for us. And I picked up quite a few things, particularly your wages there. That's a little scary there in terms of what you increase wages to. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is scary for sure.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. And everything else went with it. I mean, all the benefits went with it too. So, a lot of the weights and things like that were out there for being able to qualify for this or that, they all get that, the gym memberships. And I mean, it's just crazy what you have to do to be competitive in today's market. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, thank you very much, Morgan, for
Absolutely.
doing this for us. I really appreciate it.
Say hi to your son. He's on a number of committees with me, and enjoy working with him all the time. So
okay, I sure will. I sure will. Morgan.
Okay.
So, Morgan, anything we can do in Ohio, please keep us in your Rolodex. These guys have extra time too that they can throw into projects. So
There you go.
please let us know. For those that are in attendance, this was recorded. So if you do have a staff person who was unable to attend, this will be posted to the YouTube channel for OSFAA, probably within a day. So send them over there to take a look at that. Plus you can see our past meetings. And the next meeting will be planned for sometime in April. So still working out some logistics there, but If you have suggestions for speakers, please let us know that as well. And with that said, Alan's got nothing, so I think we're adjourning.
Good.
And moving on. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks for the opportunity. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye,
Take
thank
care.
you.
Thank
You
you,
did.
Morgan.
Good to see everybody.
Thank you. We
Okay.
appreciate it.
Tom.
Hey.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.